Welcome to Gracefully Graying. I'm your host, Attorney Henry Gorentine. Today on Gracefully Graying, I am very pleased to welcome Brad Dembs of the Schluter Hughes law firm as we discuss issues for children with disabilities. Brad, welcome to Gracefully Graying.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
First of all, it's a pleasure having you. Why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about who you are and your background?
Sure. So I've been practicing education law representing families of children with disabilities for my entire career. I started at a nonprofit called Disability Rights Michigan right after graduating from law school at Wayne State. And I worked there for about 5 years, and then I moved to Chicago to work in private practice at a small firm doing the same type of law. I moved back to Michigan just under a year ago so I could be closer to family and friends. I had a daughter and needed some extra grandparent babysitting support. So that was part of the reason I moved back. And the other part was to join the law firm here at Schluter and Hughes, which is a really exciting firm to work for.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing the diversity of your firm as far as doing things that are a little bit unusual for law firms. Brad, what are basic special education rights?
So when we talk about special education rights, what we tell parents or family members that they are entitled to is a free, appropriate public education. There's an acronym for that, and there are countless acronyms in this area of law, like many areas of law, but free, appropriate public education, or FAPE, you may hear people refer to it as. And that's really the North Star and the guiding principle of what makes or what a child's entitled to. Free is pretty obvious. Public education, fairly straightforward. It's appropriate where we have a lot of gray area and a lot of litigation or disagreement comes up. What is appropriate for a child with a disability? Thankfully, there was a Supreme Court case not too long ago, within the past decade or so, so pretty current in terms of the Supreme Court. And that case was called Andrew F. And it interpreted what appropriate means and essentially came to the conclusion that appropriate must be meaningful in light of a child's individual circumstances. So children have to have the opportunity to achieve ambitious goals, but realistic, taking into account their disabilities and what they may be capable of achieving.
What is the role of parents in the process of determining these rights for children with special needs or disabilities?
Parents play an essential role. Just like in every other aspect of their children's lives, parents play a very important role in the education decision-making process. Parents are the ultimate decision makers about whether a child receives special education services or not. The school is required to obtain parental consent to provide any services and even to conduct evaluations to determine whether a child's eligible for special education. And once it's determined that a child is eligible, there's a meeting and parents bring their own expertise and perspective about their child to the table in the discussion about what the child needs.
What about the role of grandparents in this process? Something near here.
Well, well, grandparents can have a lot of different roles, as we see, in all of our lives. I remember my grandparents helping get me to school sometimes, or picking me up when I was sick. So there's a logistical role that grandparents always play in their grandchildren's lives. On a practical note, grandparents can assist their children and their grandchildren, but specifically the parents of the child with disabilities, in getting organized and prepared for meetings. I can't tell you how many times I hear people say when they come to me with concerns, oh, I wish I had known this sooner, or I could have really used this information a month ago before things blew up with the school. So grandparents can be another source of information if they're well informed. If grandparents know that their grandchild has a disability, they may want to look into, well, what is my grandchild entitled to under the law, and how can I help inform the child's parents about how to meet their needs and what they might want to ask for from their school district. Uh, if I can add to that, just
Yes,
one
please.
more, on a more formal note, grandparents sometimes step into a parent's role or a guardian's role if parents are unavailable for whatever reason that may be. Uh, Grandparents can step into the parental role and exercise all of the same rights as parents when it comes to educational decision making.
So the decision-making role of parents and grandparents can literally be identical in certain situations. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it can be. So if grandparents have obtained legal guardianship over the grandchild, they can execute all forms of consent and make decisions as if they are the parent. Sometimes parents can also delegate educational decision-making authority to a grandparent through a power of attorney or a separate form that the school may have specifically to indicate that a grandparent is authorized to participate in meetings, communicate with the school district directly, receive educational records from the school, and things along those lines.
What are IEPs?
So an IEP, there's another acronym for you, stands for Individualized Education Program or Plan. And this can really be thought of as a roadmap for special education services. So an IEP is a legal document. It's a living document that is built and put together by a team of individuals that consist of the parent, the school district staff, so any staff at the school that may be working with the child or providing services. For example, if the child has a speech impediment, there may be a speech language pathologist on the IEP team. If the child has dyslexia, there may be a reading specialist from the school or a special education teacher on the IEP team. And this collection of individuals comes together to meet at an IEP team meeting to determine what the document will say. So it starts with a good understanding of a student's present levels of functioning in all areas of functioning. So that means academic, social, emotional, behavioral, functional, all the different areas where a child may have skill deficits related to their disabilities. How can we develop goals to work towards to build skills in those areas of deficit? And then what specific services, programs, accommodations, and placement do we need to consider adding to the document to ensure that we can give that child meaningful opportunity to make progress towards those goals?
So, Brad, is this done like at the beginning of the school year or different points? I mean, it's like you have a special needs child. Uh, Either the child is being mainstreamed or is in a special program. So, how does it work from a parent or a grandparent's perspective with regard to the IEP?
Well, it can happen at any time. If we're starting from scratch and a child has never been considered for special education or evaluated, the first step would be to conduct evaluations. And the school district has their own affirmative obligation to determine if a child has or may need special education. And that's based on their functioning in the school setting, what they're observing. The school district should initiate evaluations on their own. But that doesn't mean that parents can't and shouldn't request evaluations. They absolutely should if they're concerned on their own about the way things are going or what they are seeing at home or what's being reported from school. They shouldn't just rely on the school district to conduct evaluations. They should ask them explicitly about their concerns and what they want to be considered in terms of evaluating for special ed eligibility. Once evaluations take place, if the school district determines that the child's eligible, that's when the IEP meeting comes into play, the initial IEP meeting. And then once parents consent to services being implemented, the IEP can be put in place. After that, IEP meetings can be updated at any time. It's a living document. And if there are changes, if there are updates, the IEP team can meet and amend the document at any time to account for changes in the child's circumstances or the schools.
Now, do the IEPs vary from school district to school district?
Uh, there's a cynical answer, but I'll give you a more straightforward answer, which is every school district is a little bit different in how they operate, but the law is the same, and the law applies to each school district the same. There is federal law, which is called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and there's state law, the Michigan Administrative Rules for Special Education. And these laws mirror each other to a large extent, but the state law in Michigan provides some additional supports and services and rights beyond what the federal law provides. A big example of that, actually, which I think we might talk about in more detail, is related to transition age students. So in Michigan, we're the only state in the country that provides an entitlement for special education up to age 26. In most other states, it's 22 at the highest. So Michigan provides 4 additional years, essentially a whole additional traditional high school career, 4 more years of special education and related services if the child needs that.
Brad, tell us about legal guardianships in this area.
Sure. So a guardianship is a legal authority bestowed by a court for an individual to step into the role of parent, essentially, of a child. This can come up when parents are unable to act as the parent and someone else needs to step in, or if parents are no longer living, someone may need to fill that role for a minor child. Oftentimes that can be a grandparent or another family member, an adult who can step in and be responsible for that child and for their needs. And that's something that the school will recognize. Either a parent or legal guardian or someone acting as a parent should have all of the same rights and responsibilities as a birth parent in the education process.
Brad, you mentioned that Michigan is unique in providing services to age 26. So tell us about the transition from school to adulthood for a child with disabilities.
This is one of the most fundamental and significant times in a young person's life, whether they have disabilities or not, when you're preparing for that transition from school to adulthood to life as a member of your community, whether you're working or going to college or trade school or whatever the case may be. We want to make sure, especially for our young adults with disabilities, that they have the skills necessary to allow them to participate in that next stage of life to the greatest extent possible. So that means giving them training and skill building on areas like vocation, independent living, accessing their community, and making sure that when they are done with school, whether that's at 18, 20, 22, or 26 in Michigan, that they have the tools and the skills needed to be successful out in the world.
It's important. Tell us about supports and services that are available for a family who has a child with disabilities.
Well, the school district is the main source of programming and support, and through an IEP, uh, you should be entitled to any services that you need in areas of skill deficit. So I mentioned speech language pathology before, could also be social work support, occupational therapy, physical therapy, uh, reading specialist, math, additional math learning, uh, and behavioral support for children who have may have issues controlling their behavior as it relates to a disability. The school is essentially the hub for providing these services to allow the child to meaningfully participate and benefit from their education and to learn how to build their skills in all of these areas, right? Because it's important to remember education doesn't just mean academics, education means learning how to be a functional member of society. So that's learning behavior, socialization, how to cope with emotional difficulties, as well as those things like speech, physical therapy, occupational therapy. Um, so those are supports and services that should be available in schools. And I say should because I've been, practicing in this area for long enough that I've seen situations where any or all of the above are not being provided as they should be to a child with disabilities. And that's where parents may be in a position where they need to seek outside help, whether that's through an attorney like me or an educational advocate to assist them in interfacing with the school district to advocate for their rights and ensure that those services that they're entitled to are provided so they receive that free, appropriate public education.
Let me touch on another issue. And a big issue now in our society is dealing with people either with autism or on the spectrum. And I guess this would fall right in to the realm that you're dealing with. So tell us about situations involving that.
Well, children with autism are certainly most often children who are eligible for special education and related services under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Autism is one of 13 specific categories of disability that a child can be eligible for under the IDEA to receive services in school. Oftentimes, children with autism have some underlying symptoms or issues caused by their disability that impact their functioning in school, whether that's academic or social, emotional, or behavioral. And there are other additional resources that can assist families of children with autism out in the community, in addition to the school system, to provide them with skill building, with therapies and supports to account for their disability. Uh, One thing I'd also like to mention is a concept called least restrictive environment. You mentioned the term mainstreaming before. What that really gets to is least restrictive environment, or LRE, in our alphabet soup of concepts here. LRE means it's based on a concept in the law that states that children with disabilities are entitled to be included with their non-disabled peers to the greatest extent appropriate. Again, here's that word appropriate in light of their individual circumstances. So what this really means is schools can't simply move a child with a specific disability to a separate classroom or a separate school in light of their disability without first attempting to provide them with services and supports in the public school, in the general education setting, and seeing whether that's appropriate or to what extent they need to be removed from that setting. It may be many students with disabilities may go to a resource room or a special education classroom for a few hours a day to focus on a specific area of need, and then continue with their general education peers for the remainder of the school day. So there's a spectrum from full-time in general education to full-time removed from general education. And the reason I bring it up right here is we see disputes over inclusion, over least restrictive environment come up quite often for children with autism, and children specifically with autism who may have behavioral difficulties, externalizing behaviors in the school setting that the school may see as disruptive or inappropriate. Even in those scenarios, the school has to respond by attempting to provide services to assist that child in coping with and managing their behavior, learning how to behave appropriately in the general education setting before considering removal to a separate program or a separate school.
Brad, often parents are in denial as to the needs of their children. How do you deal with that? And to take it further, let's say what happens in the initial consultation when you're meeting with parents who are seeking your services with regard to trying to get the best possible outcome for a child with some form of disabilities?
A concept I really like to talk about with parents, and that I try to incorporate into my practice, is called grounded hope. So when you talk about parents who may not be fully accepting their child's disability, or not willing to face head on the challenges that are ahead, I like to explain to them this concept of grounded hope, which means essentially we accept and understand that our child has a disability, and they will have some challenges that they face that are separate and distinct from students without disabilities, but we can still aspire for them to achieve as much as is possible in light of their disabilities. We still hope for them to soar like any other kid, and to be able to reach their potential and achieve their dreams, whatever they are, in addition to what our dreams are for our children. What they hope for themselves and what they can achieve. We want to push them to be able to accomplish that while being grounded in the reality of the current situation and what their disabilities are. And being grounded means, how do we tackle those things head on? How do we find services and supports through the school or outside of the school, or a combination of both, to allow that child to reach their full potential, and have the appropriate services that will allow them to make progress in light of their individual disabilities and needs. So I chat about that with parents who may be struggling, with at the outset of this conversation, and thinking about this type of thing. And then really an intake is an opportunity to provide parents with thoughts, reactions to the concerns they bring to me, and give them some potential avenues to pursue to ensure that their children are getting the services and supports that they need in school. Sometimes a situation is dire enough that that they need to retain me, and I need to jump in straight away and communicating with the school district. But more often than not, where we start is I provide some guidance, some support, some coaching with the background and experience that I have in this area of law to help parents navigate that special education process on their own, with the guidance and backing of my experience in the field.
Brad, earlier you mentioned there were, I think, 13 different points or for being qualified for disabilities for the programs. You mentioned autism. What are some of the others?
Sure. So an important thing to note here is, as a part of the evaluation process, schools will ultimately determine whether a child is eligible for special education. So when we talk about eligibility, that means that under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, uh, a child falls within the criteria for one of 13 different categories. Once they are determined to meet the criteria for one of those categories, they're entitled to special education and related services, regardless of what their needs are. So eligibility is really a foot in the door, but a school district can't say, oh, you're eligible for special education as a student with a learning disability, so you're not going to get any social work support because that's not related to the fact that you have difficulty reading. So there I've just touched on one disability category, which is specific learning disability. There are others like deafness or blindness. One of the biggest ones that we deal with is other health impairment, which can be a bit of a catch-all, other health impairment, but oftentimes this is where we find eligibility for ADHD or ADD. Another category is emotional impairment or emotional disability. So that may be issues like bipolar disorder, pervasive developmental disorder. But the key in looking at any of these categories is, how is the student's disability impacting them in school? How is it impacting their ability to access their education and benefit from their education program? And do they need, because of their disability, special education and related services to allow them to receive that appropriate education?
Brad, we're down to about a minute. What are some final thoughts you would like to share with our viewers before we sign off?
Uh, Help is out there. It's important to remember that sometimes when it may feel difficult. An IEP team meeting is meant to be a collaborative process, and more often than not, it is. And school districts do a great job of bringing parents into the fold and communicating, explaining, and sharing with them in the process. However, it's inherently a bit intimidating to sit at a table with an entire group of school personnel or district administrators who you may feel know more about this area of law and know more about education overall than you do, in terms of what you're entitled to. What's important to remember above all is you are the expert in your child. So you bring a significant expertise to the table that no one else there has, and that's the expertise in your child. And that's an opportunity for you to share that expertise by explaining how your child functions, what their behavior, if they have any, may be communicating, based on all of the experience that you have with them at home and in the community. And you're a valuable member of that team, and don't forget it. And if you need help participating in that meeting, or ensuring that you're ready to confidently share your expertise and respond to questions or concerns that may come up, then there are individuals out here in the world who can assist you in preparing for that and understanding what your rights are.
Important point, very well stated. Brad Demps of Schluter Hughes, we're out of time. I want to thank you so much for being our guest on Gracefully Graying. I want to thank, of course, our sponsors, our viewers, and of course, Bloomfield Cable for making Gracefully Graying possible. Brad, thank you again.
Thanks, Henry. Take care.
You too.